We're settled into Oceana, or near Ocean City in Washington. We traveled up from Sauvie Island, which was fabulous, and once we arrived here, we were staying at Thousand Trails to check it out. They've given us a year free membership, and so we're going to take advantage of those places in the Pacific Northwest. This campground is half of it is shut off because a bridge was damaged, and so half the campsites are on the other side of the bridge on the ocean side. So it's not quite what we were looking forward to. But we have a nice little spot here. It is cold and foggy as opposed to how wonderful it was on Sauvie Island. So right now I'm doing a little bit of stitching, and I thought I'd go through a couple of stitches that I do on my wool projects. Down the line I will cover coloring and embroidery stitches, but that'll be another day. Right now it's kind of a wool day. So that one of the fabulous things that happened was I forgot my lamp or my light for stitching, and was using a flashlight up until now, and then G said we should stop at a Walmart on the way, and although they kind of drive me crazy the way the store is laid out, I did find this fabulous little LED light that is just perfect for my stitching when I'm sitting here at the table. It was $15, and I'm just going to leave it in the RV. When I'm traveling with my wool, I have the projects all prepped, but I never can decide which thread I'm going to take, so I bring the whole box of thread, and I pack my Valdani threads and my DMCs in one of these boxes that you can get at Joann's, and they are for Hot Wheels, or we call them Hot Wheel boxes, but because they'd fit the Hot Wheel cars. But I just put all my threads in there, and it has a double side. I have kind of outgrown the thread box, but I still bring as many threads as I can, because I just don't know what I'm going to need on the trip. So the stitches I want to cover are my whip stitch, which I use predominantly in my wool, and my buttonhole, not a buttonhole stitch, a blanket stitch, and I'll show you how I do that and on what I do that. I use a combination of the two on most of my projects. And then there's those embellishing stitches, so we'll go through that. So as you can see, I've already started to whip stitch my project. I tend to whip stitch all the small areas. I don't think you can tell the difference between this whip stitch and a blanket stitch, but there's a couple of things that I would like to share with you. I've ended right here with my whip stitch, but I kind of want to start over here to continue the whip stitch with my white thread. So the way I do this is the best thing about SF 101, is I will poke a hole where I want to start so I can see it on the opposite side, and then I will just put my thread underneath that SF 101 and come up near that hole. That way I don't have to keep knotting off wherever I end and restarting with a new knot. That thread is not going to show up, and then I can come up here and start at this point. Now the way I do this whip stitch is I've come up here, right here, and I'm going to go down perpendicular right there. So I choose the length of my stitch and the distance between each stitch, and I try to stay pretty true to that, although at times I get a little cattywampus, as you can see right here. But you know, this is a primitive project and I don't sweat it. And so then I'm going to decide that my stitch, the width between my stitches is going to be about that, where I came up to where the needle is, and then I'm going to make the length. The big thing about the whip stitch that you want it to look like a blanket stitch is that you make it kind of consistent. So I'm just going to keep going up and down. As you can see, I've now made my stitches all the way around this whip stitch, and I kept the entry point and the exit point perpendicular to each other. For the most part, they're straight up and down and equal distance apart from each other. So it gives the look of the blanket stitch without the extra thread and work. So now here I am. I'm going to jump again to this point. So I'm going to go on the back, and I see that hole I made, and I'm going to just drag this thread under that SF101 and pull it through so that I don't have to really knot off. It's secure in there. Then I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to continue on with the whip stitch, making sure that it's at equal distance and that as close to the same length as the ones on the other side of the muffler. And then I'll continue on down around here. I use the blanket stitch for large areas where there is a long expanse of stitching, or around the outside edge of a penny rug, anywhere where there's going to be a really large color showing. So in this case, I'm going to blanket stitch around the red N from this Buttermilk Basin free block of the month for 2016. This is the latest block. I'm quite pleased that I've been keeping up on these. So the way I do a blanket stitch is I come up and I hold the thread off with my thumb. I'm going to enter my piece, deciding ahead of time the length and the width of my stitches, and I'm going to bring the pointed edge of the needle up on the edge of my piece with this thread behind it. So I'll make this loop, and then I get this nice little stitch. And then as long as I keep that thread over here with my thumb, I'm coming up on the edge and I'm catching that loop. And I'm just going to keep going down, paying attention as much as I can to the length of my stitch, and that I'm coming up perpendicular on the edge of my piece. And keeping my width. The width is what is the distance between the two stitches, about the same. And then I'm going to come all the way around. And as I make any kind of slight curve, I will adjust my stitch so that it's still perpendicular to where the entry and exit points are. The difficulty with doing a buttonhole on small areas, it's like this area right here, I would never do a buttonhole. For me, it's too much work, it's not as clean looking, and so I will just do a whip stitch in these small areas and only use the buttonhole in my larger areas.